A cold wind howled through the busy streets of the city, rattling the golden signs of towering buildings. Among them stood the Grand Royal Hotel, a beacon of luxury, where the wealthy dined on gourmet meals and slept on silk sheets. The entrance was lined with golden lights, a red carpet rolled out for its high-profile guests. But just a few feet away from this world of elegance, a frail man sat on the pavement, clutching his tattered coat around his thin frame. His name was Ragu. Once, he had a name that meant something. Once, he had a family, a home, and a life that was not confined to the mercy of strangers. But fate had been cruel. A business collapse, a series of unfortunate events, and within months, he had lost everything. Now he lived on the streets, surviving on scraps and the kindness of passers-by, though kindness was a rare luxury in itself. That night, as hunger gnawed at his insides, Ragu mustered the courage to step towards the grand entrance of the hotel. The warmth inside, the scent of freshly baked bread, the sound of clinking glasses, it all felt like a dream. Maybe, just maybe, he could find a small job here. Something. Anything. Before he could even step inside, a uniformed guard blocked his path, his eyes filled with disgust. "Hey, where do you think you're going?" the guard snapped. Ragu hesitated. I just need some food. I can work, clean dishes." The guard scoffed. "Get lost, old man. We don't need beggars dirtying the place." A few elite guests, dressed in expensive suits and gowns, paused to watch the scene unfold. Some sneered, some chuckled, but none intervened. Before Ragu could say another word, the guard shoved him backward. He stumbled, his frail body hitting the cold pavement. Laughter, whispers. People stepped over him as if he were invisible. Humiliated, Ragu picked himself up and walked away, his heart heavier than his empty stomach. Little did he know, someone had been watching. Someone who would change his life forever. Ragu walked down the deserted street, his feet dragging against the cold pavement. The humiliation of being thrown out of the Grand Royal Hotel burned deep, but it wasn't new. He had been treated like this before, ignored, shunned, seen as nothing more than an eyesore. He made his way toward Hope Shelter, a rundown building at the edge of the city where the forgotten found refuge. It wasn't much, just a few creaky beds, shared blankets, and a hot meal when donations were generous. But to Ragu, it was home. As he entered, he was greeted by Shanti, an elderly woman who had run the shelter for years. Despite her wrinkled hands and tired eyes, she always carried a warmth in her smile. "Ragu, you're late tonight. Everything okay?" she asked, concern lacing her voice. Ragu forced a weak smile. "Just another bad day, Maji. Nothing new." Shani sighed. She had seen many like him, men who had lost everything but still carried the burden of their past. She handed him a bowl of lentil soup, the aroma filling the dimly lit room. Ragu sat near the corner, watching others huddle together for warmth. Some whispered stories of the lives they once had. A banker who lost his fortune, a woman abandoned by her family, a young man who had escaped an abusive home. Every face held a story, and Ragu was just another name in the sea of misfortune. As he took a bite of his soup, his mind wandered back to the Grand Royal Hotel. The way the guests had looked at him, the way the guard had pushed him, it made his stomach churn more than hunger ever could. He had once been on the other side. A businessman, a father, a husband. Years ago, he had owned a small textile factory, his hands weaving dreams into fabric. His wife, Mira, had been his pillar of strength, and his daughter, Anya, was the light of his life. But business was unpredictable. A dishonest partner had led him into bankruptcy, forcing him to sell everything: his factory, his home, his dreams. The loss was unbearable. Mira fell sick from stress, and without money for treatment, he watched helplessly as the love of his life slipped away. His daughter, just a teenager then, was taken in by relatives in another city. And Ragu, once a man of dignity, was left with nothing. "You're lost in your thoughts again." Shanti's voice brought him back to the present. He shook his head. "Just tired." Shanti sat beside him. "You know, pain doesn't last forever. Life has strange ways of surprising us." Ragu gave a dry chuckle. "Surprises aren't for people like us, Maji." She simply smiled and patted his shoulder. Outside, the city was alive with laughter, cars honking, and bright lights shining against the night sky. But in the shelter, The only sound was the quiet breathing of people too exhausted to dream. Little did Ragu know, fate had already set something in motion, something that would shake his world the next day. The morning sun filtered through the cracked windows of Hope's shelter, casting long golden streaks across the worn-out mats where many still slept. Ragu sat outside, staring at the bustling street. The world moved on, indifferent to those like him. His stomach growled, but he ignored it. Hunger had become a familiar companion. Instead, his mind kept replaying the previous night, the way the Grand Royal Hotel's guard had shoved him, the disgust in the eyes of the wealthy guests, the bitter taste of shame. Maybe I should stop trying, he muttered under his breath. Just then, a commotion near the entrance of the shelter pulled him from his thoughts. A sleek black Mercedes had pulled up, an odd sight in this part of the city. Ragu's brow furrowed as he saw a sharply dressed man step out. Arjun Mehta. The name alone carried weight. The owner of the Grand Royal Hotel, a billionaire whose face was often splashed across newspapers for his business achievements and charity events. But what was he doing here? Shawnee stepped forward cautiously. Can I help you, sir? Arjun's eyes scanned the shelter before they landed on Ragu. He took a step forward, his polished leather shoes clicking against the rough pavement. You, he said, his voice steady. You were the one thrown out of my hotel last night. Ragu stiffened. He could feel the eyes of everyone at the shelter on him. His hands clenched into fists. Was this man here to mock him further? To ensure he never came near his precious hotel again? I don't want trouble, Ragu muttered, turning away. But Arjun didn't leave. Instead, he let out a sigh and said something that made Ragu's breath catch. I need to talk to you. Alone. Shanti exchanged a glance with Ragu, silently asking if he was okay. He gave a small nod, more out of curiosity than willingness. They walked to a quieter corner near the back of the shelter. Arjun hesitated for a moment, as if choosing his words carefully. I saw what happened last night, he finally said. And he paused. I need to apologize. Ragu blinked in disbelief. Apologize? From a billionaire? I didn't know you were mistreated until I reviewed the security footage this morning, Arjun continued. What happened to you is unacceptable. Ragu scoffed. Unacceptable? It's just another day for people like me. Arjun's jaw tightened. It shouldn't be. He took a deep breath. Listen, I wasn't always rich. I know what it's like to have nothing. Ragu studied him, skeptical. Years ago, I lost everything. My father's business collapsed, and we were left on the streets. My mother worked as a maid just to feed us. I remember the hunger, the shame, the way people looked right through me. Arjun's voice softened. That's why I built my empire. To never feel powerless again. Something about the way he spoke made Ragu's guarded walls weaken. He could see a flicker of truth in the man's eyes. Then why are you here? Ragu asked. Arjun reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, folded paper. He handed it to Ragu. Because I want to help you. Ragu unfolded the paper and stared at it. It was an offer letter. A job. At the Grand Royal Hotel. He looked up, shocked. You're offering me a job? Arjun nodded. Yes. In the hotel's maintenance department. It's not much, but it's a start. Ragu's mind swirled with emotions. He had begged for work for years, knocked on countless doors, only to be met with rejection and pity. And now this? Why? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Arjun met his gaze. Because I see potential in you. And because everyone deserves a second chance. Ragu's throat tightened. He wanted to believe this was real, that it wasn't some cruel joke. But trust was a luxury he could no longer afford. Still, a part of him, a small, stubborn part, whispered what if. He looked at the paper again, his hands trembling. For the first time in years, hope flickered inside him. Ragu sat on his thin mattress that night, staring at the crumpled job offer in his hand. Sleep evaded him. His mind churned with doubt, fear, and a flicker of something unfamiliar. Hope. Could he trust this? Could he trust Arjun Mehta? For years, life had beaten him down. Every opportunity had either slipped through his fingers or turned out to be an illusion. The streets had taught him one harsh truth. Kindness often came with a price. Shanti noticed his turmoil and sat beside him. You're thinking of rejecting it, aren't you? She said softly. Ragu sighed. I don't know, Shanti. It feels unreal. She studied him for a moment before speaking. You've been praying for a way out of this life, Ragu. And now that it's here, you're afraid to take it. Because I don't want to be a fool, he admitted. What if this is just some rich man's guilt-driven charity? What if they humiliate me? What if it's real? Shawnee interrupted. Raghu fell silent. You have nothing to lose, Raghu, she continued. But you do have something to gain. A fresh start. That night, he barely slept. But by morning, he had made up his mind. Dressed in a donated but clean shirt, Raghu hesitated before stepping inside. His heart pounded as he approached the reception. The woman behind the desk looked at him with mild surprise. Not disdain, not pity, just curiosity. I'm here for work, he said, his voice firmer than he expected. Mr. Mehta hired me. Within minutes, he was led to the staff quarters at the back of the hotel. He was introduced to the maintenance team. People who didn't judge him, people who had their own struggles but worked hard every day. His supervisor, Ramesh, handed him a uniform. Welcome to the team, he said, patting Raghu's shoulder. Let's get to work. The first few days were exhausting. Raghu scrubbed floors, fixed leaking pipes, and carried heavy supplies. His muscles ached from years of malnourishment, but he pushed through. Every time self-doubt crept in, he reminded himself, this is my chance. I won't waste it. At night, he returned to the shelter, too tired to overthink. But deep inside, something was shifting. For the first time in years, he felt useful. One evening, as he wiped sweat from his forehead, he heard a familiar voice behind him. How's the job treating you? Raghu turned to see Arjun Mehta standing there, hands in his pockets. Harder than begging, Raghu admitted, managing a small smile. Arjun chuckled. Good. That means you're earning it. A moment of silence passed before Arjun said something unexpected. There's a charity gala tomorrow night at the hotel. I want you there. Raghu frowned. As a worker? As a guest? Raghu's stomach twisted. Why? That's not my world. Arjun's gaze was steady. Neither was it mine once. Just be there. Raghu wanted to refuse. But something in Arjun's voice made him pause. The night of the charity gala arrived. The hotel was transformed. Crystal chandeliers sparkled, classical music played softly, and the city's elite filled the ballroom, dressed in expensive suits and shimmering gowns. Raghu stood near the entrance, awkward in a borrowed suit. He felt like an imposter. What am I doing here? He muttered. Then he spotted Arjun, standing at the center of the room, addressing the guests. Tonight, Arjun said, we're not just here to celebrate luxury. We're here to talk about second chances. The room quieted. A week ago, Arjun continued, a man was thrown out of this very hotel. A man who had once been just like me, struggling, trying to survive. Murmurs spread through the crowd. Raghu's heart pounded. That man is here tonight, Arjun said, looking directly at him. Raghu, please come forward. Raghu froze. Every eye turned toward him. Sweat formed on his palms. His legs felt heavy. Then he walked, step by step, past the murmuring guests, past the same golden doors he had once been thrown out of. When he reached Arjun's side, the billionaire placed a hand on his shoulder. Raghu is proof that opportunity can change lives, Arjun announced. And tonight, I'm making a commitment. The Grand Royal Hotel will launch a program to employ and train homeless individuals, giving them the second chance they deserve. Gasps. Applause. Raghu stood there, stunned. Arjun turned to him and whispered, this is only the beginning. Raghu swallowed the lump in his throat. For the first time in years, he believed it. As the applause faded, Raghu felt the weight of everything that had happened sink in. Just a week ago, he had been thrown out of this very hotel like trash. Now he was standing next to a billionaire, being recognized in front of some of the city's most powerful people. The past felt like a bad dream. Arjun patted his shoulder before stepping aside, letting the moment belong to him. Would you like to say something, Raghu? Raghu swallowed. His throat was dry. He had never spoken in front of such a crowd before. But he knew this was more than just his story. It was the story of countless others like him, fighting every day just to survive. He took a deep breath. A few days ago, I was invisible, he began. His voice was rough but steady. People passed me on the streets like I didn't exist. When I entered this hotel, I was thrown out like I didn't matter. The audience listened in pin-drop silence. But one person saw me, he continued, glancing at Arjun. One person believed I deserved a chance. And that's all someone like me really needs, a chance. Some guests exchanged glances. Others nodded. I won't waste this opportunity, Raghu said, his voice firm. And I hope this is just the beginning for many others like me. Applause erupted. It wasn't just polite, it was real. People were moved. As Raghu stepped away, Arjun leaned in. That was brave. And powerful. Raghu exhaled. I just spoke the truth. Exactly, Arjun said. That night, as Raghu returned to the shelter, he was met with wide-eyed stares. News of the gala had already spread. Raghu bhai, you were on TV, a young boy said excitedly. Shani stood at the back, smiling. When everyone else had gone to sleep, she approached him. You're not the same man who walked into that hotel a few days ago, she said. Raghu chuckled. I'm still me, Shani. No, she said, shaking her head. You're becoming the man you were meant to be. He fell silent. He didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in years, he was looking forward to finding out. Over the next few months, the Grand Royal Hotel's Second Chance program became a reality. Homeless men and women were offered training in housekeeping, maintenance, and hospitality. Some struggled at first, just as Raghu had, but with time, they found their rhythm. Raghu himself worked tirelessly, not just at his job, but in helping others transition from the streets to stable employment. One evening, Arjun called him into his office. How are things going? Arjun asked. Better than I ever imagined, Raghu admitted. People are finally getting a shot at a real life. Arjun studied him for a moment. I want you to lead the program, Raghu, he said. Raghu froze. What? You understand these people. You've been where they are. You can guide them better than anyone else. Raghu felt overwhelmed. Just months ago, he had been sleeping on the streets. Now, a billionaire was offering him a leadership role. I don't know if I'm ready for that, he said honestly. Arjun smiled. You weren't ready to enter this hotel either. But look where you are now. Raghu exhaled. He thought about the people still struggling outside, the ones who just needed someone to believe in them. Okay, he said finally. I'll do it. Months turned into a year. Raghu's life was completely different. He had a stable job, a real place to stay, and the respect of those around him. But he never forgot where he came from. He made sure the Second Chance program expanded beyond the hotel. With Arjun's support, they partnered with other businesses, creating more job opportunities for the homeless. One day, as Raghu was overseeing a new batch of trainees, he saw a familiar figure standing near the entrance. Shanti. She looked hesitant, but there was something in her eyes. Hope. Is this program still giving second chances? She asked. Raghu smiled. Always. As he led her inside, he realized something. A year ago, he had been thrown out of this very hotel. Now, he was bringing people in. And that, he knew, was the real victory.